At the beginning of the movie, two police officers, responding to a report, arrive at a dilapidated house. Once inside, they see bloodied handprints all over the walls. Cautiously, they proceed further and soon reach a door.
Police! Freeze!
There, they discover a young woman with her eyes gouged out. Suddenly, a burly man hidden in the shadows swings an axe, killing Blaine with 2 strikes, and then chops off one of William's arms. Luckily, Williams reacted quickly and shot the man in the back of the head. Otherwise, Williams would have met a grim fate as well. But the man does not die. Soon after, a large number of police officers arrive at the scene. In the villa's yard, they uncover 7 eyeless corpses, most of them female. This horrifying case sparks widespread panic once it hits the news. Fortunately, the one-armed Williams and the young woman who had her eyes gouged out survive. In the blink of an eye, 4 years pass. Williams is now disabled, having spent these 4 years living in constant nightmares. The gruesome death of his partner Blaine leaves Williams deeply guilty. At the same time, Williams' reduced combat effectiveness led him to work in a prison. Today, he is ordered to take 4 male juvenile delinquents, and his colleague Chi-Chi is to take 4 female juvenile delinquents to a community for labor reform. Their task is simple: clean this 9-story hotel. If they complete the task, their sentences will be reduced by 1 month. But they didn't know that this mission would kill them, because they are already being watched by Jacob. Who is Jacob? He is the one who brutally murdered and gouged out the eyes of 7 people. Jacob's first target is Kira, who is taking a shower, but his plan is interrupted by the sudden intrusion of Michael, forcing Jacob to shift his focus to a lost boy named Richie. Jacob slowly approaches Richie and hooks Richie's leg with an iron hook. Richie screams in agony, but Jacob doesn't care about Richie's pain and forcefully drags him, pulling him into the elevator. Jacob launches another sneak attack on Hannah. Jacob lifts Hannah and slams her hard onto the floor, causing her to instantly lose consciousness. Seeing this, Jacob flips over the unconscious Hannah, grabs her head, and then reaches into her eye sockets, gouging out her eyeballs. Next, Jacob swings his iron hook at Kira, who is trying to escape through a dog door. Jacob first pulls Kira back with one yank, then with a cold expression, he slams her hard against the wall. Jacob then climbs into the conveyor belt himself and drags Kira in with him. The process is extremely brutal and straightforward. At this moment, Kira's screams are heard by Williams and the others. By questioning the hotel manager, Margaret, they learn that the conveyor belt's endpoint is on the top floor. So Williams and Christine immediately take the elevator to rescue her. Williams notices blood on Christine's arm and asks if she is injured. Christine says the blood is not hers. They then look up and see pieces of Hannah's scalp all over the elevator ceiling. A panicked Williams and Christine step out of the elevator and encounter Ty. It turns out Ty witnessed the entire process of Richie being taken. From Ty's description of Jacob, Williams realizes that this is the same terrifying murderer from years ago. Knowing that Jacob is still alive, Williams hands Christine a stun gun and tells her to protect herself while he goes to avenge his partner. Ironically, as soon as Williams steps out of the room, Jacob's iron hook pierces through his jaw and out of his mouth, and then Jacob forcefully pulls him up to the ceiling. Just when Christine and Ty think Jacob has been killed, Williams' body falls down from above. Christine apologizes and takes the gun from Williams' hand. Meanwhile, 4 of the juveniles have reached the top floor of the hotel. Unbeknownst to them, Jacob is watching their every move through a one-way mirror. When Jacob sees them split up, he carries Kira away. When Kira woke up in the cage, she saw several corpses with their eyes gouged out. Richie, who was dead or alive, and Hannah, who was already dead. Terrified, Kira prays for someone to rescue her, but it is Jacob who enters. Kira, like a frightened bird, retreats to the corner. Looking at the terrified Jacob, Kira asked, seeing Richie wake up, Jacob shifts his attention. Jacob pressed down on Richie's head and grinned before gouging out Richie's eyeballs with his hands. Jacob then drags Kira out of the cage. Just as Jacob forces Kira to drink bathwater, memories from Jacob's childhood resurface. It turns out Jacob had been abused, which indirectly caused his peculiar fixation with cross tattoos. Suddenly, while gently caressing Kira's back tattoo, Jacob hears the alarm in the room. The enraged Jacob locks Kira back in the cage and finds the culprit. Jacob crashes through the glass and attacks, causing Russell and Melissa to run in terror. Russell and Melissa hide in a storage room. holding their breath, not daring to make a sound. After ensuring it is quiet outside, Russell opens a window and ties the fire hose around Melissa's waist to help her escape. However, Melissa has barely descended 3 meters when Jacob pulls her back. Seeing Jacob about to grab her hair, Melissa dodges frantically.
Let me go! Let me down!
Jacob changed his mind when he heard a click and slowly let go of the fire hose and lowered Melissa down. After toying with Melissa for a moment, Jacob releases the hose. Fortunately, the length of the hose saves Melissa's life, though her right hand is severely injured. Ignoring Melissa's fate, Jacob gouges out Russell's eyeballs. Meanwhile, a dog emerges from the dog door, becoming extremely agitated after drinking some fresh blood. More dogs appear, and in no time, the hungry dogs devour Melissa. Simultaneously, Jacob finds another couple, but just as he is about to strike, Michael pushes Zoe aside, avoiding the lethal blow. Enraged, Jacob searches everywhere for them. Suddenly, he hears a noise, kicks open a door, and lifts the bed with one hand, but finds nothing underneath. Jacob then proceeds to open the wardrobe. In reality, Zoe is hiding inside the wardrobe. However, due to a bullet pressing on his optic nerve, Jacob's vision is a bit blurry, so he does not see Zoe, allowing her to escape this ordeal. But as soon as Jacob steps out of the room, he hears a phone ringing, so he returns. This time, he finds the terrified Zoe. With an evil grin, Jacob grabs Zoe by the hair and drags her out of the wardrobe, then slams her hard against the wall. At that moment, the phone rings again. Looking at the phone in his hand, Jacob once again falls into painful memories. He recalls his childhood experiences, being locked in a dog cage and treated like an animal. Thinking of this, Jacob forcibly shoves the phone into Zoe's mouth. Meanwhile, Michael finds Ty and Christine, and they deliberately trigger a mechanism, setting up an ambush at the elevator to catch Jacob.
Christine, come on!
Seeing them trying to escape, Jacob chops the elevator control panel with an axe, causing the elevator to malfunction instantly. As Jacob is about to break open the elevator door, Ty makes a running jump to the top of the elevator. In this critical moment, Ty pulls Christine up, then uses the stun gun to stop Jacob from climbing up. Soon after, Ty and Christine escape to a guest room. They find the room luxuriously decorated, with wallpaper made of $100 bills. Suddenly, they hear Kira's voice. Following the sound, Ty and Christine find Kira, but just then, Jacob returns, forcing Ty and Christine to leave. Not long after, Jacob returns to the confinement room. Meanwhile, after calming down, Ty comes up with a plan. The plan is simple and brutal: smash Jacob's collection of eyeballs. Hearing Jacob's footsteps, Ty quickly hides. Soon, Jacob arrives, drawn by the noise. While the visually impaired Jacob searches around, Christine quietly sneaks into the confinement room. However, Christine searches all over and cannot find the key to the cage. On the other side, the visually impaired Jacob activates his sense of smell. Jacob grabs the stun gun and uses it to knock out Ty. Then Jacob pushes the safe towards Ty, crushing him to death. Meanwhile, Christine, tasked with rescuing Kira, hears the door opening and quickly hides in fear. But it's not Jacob who enters, it's the manager, Margaret. Seeing this, Kira lets her guard down. It turns out Margaret is Jacob's mother. She orchestrated all of this just to lure Williams and so her son could get his revenge. Margaret then forces her son to kill Kira, but at that moment, Jacob falls into another memory. It turns out that the person who has been tormenting Jacob all along is actually his mother. Moreover, Margaret had forced Jacob to do things he never wanted to do. Thinking of this, Jacob's eyes fill with resolve, and he mercilessly kills his mother. Jacob then takes the terrified Kira away. Seeing this, Christine picks up a gun and chases after them. Before long, Christine finds them, and Jacob seems a bit dazed. Jacob grabs them, choking them so they can't breathe. As Kira is about to pass out, Jacob throws her aside, Then Jacob tried to gouge out Christine's eyes. In this critical moment, Michael suddenly arrives and knocks Jacob down. They took this opportunity to run away, and as soon as they hid in the guest room, Jacob came after them. Jacob finds the room shortly after. Seeing the open window, he thinks they have escaped. Little does he know, he has fallen into a trap. But just as they think it's over, Jacob suddenly grabs Christine's hand. Seeing this, Michael quickly swings a steel pipe, striking Jacob forcefully. Under Michael's relentless blows, Jacob lets go in pain. But the next second, Jacob climbs back up. Enraged, Christine grabs the steel pipe, curses, and then plunges the pipe into Jacob's eye socket. In the end, they drag their exhausted bodies out of the hotel.
And he's told.
The movie begins with a hospital morgue receiving a special corpse. The recently deceased is none other than Jacob, the terrifying killer from the first See No Evil who slaughtered over 20 people and cruelly gouged out their eyes. Amy then took the body's weight, but as she was measuring the body's height, Amy heard a strange noise coming from the body's mouth. Seth explained that this phenomenon is called a death rattle, a normal physiological response. Seth suggested she go clean up. As Amy stepped out of the autopsy room, she heard Holden calling her. Following the sound, Amy entered another morgue but couldn't find Holden anywhere. It turned out today was Amy's birthday, and because they had to work overtime, Holden and their friends moved the party to the morgue. Let's just say, they've got a big brain. Tamara, fascinated by death and serial killers, left the party with Carter to examine Jacob's corpse. Tamara climbed onto Jacob and kissed him. Much to her boyfriend's displeasure, the thrill of being with the actual killer's corpse excited Tamara, and she and Carter began to make out. Suddenly, Jacob's body vanished. In their panic, the room plunged into darkness. Calming down, Tamara struck a match. To their horror, they saw that Jacob had come back to life. In the next moment, Jacob grabbed Carter. As Tamara fled the morgue, she was covered in blood. She screamed for help in terror, but being on the top floor, no one heard her. Meanwhile, Jacob opened the cold storage drawer and found his mother, whom he had killed with his own hands. Jacob's past was filled with pain and torment. He was confined in a cage, and these experiences ultimately led him to end his mother's life. At this moment, Carter tried to escape. Seeing this, Jacob grabbed the fleeing Carter and violently threw him backward. Then, as Carter looked on in horror, Jacob lifted him up in the air with one hand, and then Jacob crushed Carter's neck. Then Jacob pulled the gauze from his right eye. Those who saw the first film know that the woman who blinded him was named Christine. Jacob then picked up a mask and a leather apron, and selected several surgical tools. At this moment, the indiscriminate slaughter officially began. Jacob's first target was Holden, who had trouble with his legs. Jacob swung a chain with precision, hooking Holden's wheelchair and pulling him out of it. Jacob swung the chain again, this time hooking Holden's leg, but Holden has been disabled for years, and even though he's hooked up to the chain, he feels no pain at all, only it prevented him from moving forward. With a slight pull, Jacob dragged Holden back. Holden clung desperately to the hallway railing, but his struggle was futile against the 300-pound Jacob. The only fate awaiting Holden was death. However, Holden's screams reached Amy and the others. They took the elevator downstairs, and when they walked into the morgue, they were met with chaos, but Jacob was nowhere to be found. At this moment, Will noticed blood on the cold storage drawer. He opened it to find Carter's body inside. They were instantly horrified. In the next second, the entire building plunged into darkness. At this moment, Seth, who had just finished an autopsy, grabbed a flashlight to see what was happening. Unfortunately, he encountered Jacob. Soon after, Seth found the others and locked the door behind him. Thankfully, Will quickly pulled Seth back, but the frightened group got separated in their desperate attempt to escape. At this moment, Seth and Tamara were together. Will and his sister Amy hid in an office. Kayla was alone, trying to find a place to hide. but all the nearby doors were locked. Just as Kayla was about to break down, she finally found an open door. However, Kayla didn't realize that Jacob was right behind her. In the next second, Jacob snapped Kayla's neck like a twig.
And he's told you.
Meanwhile, Seth and Tamara also found an unlocked room. Once inside, Seth hid Tamara behind a shelf, while he hid under a gurney. It didn't take long for Jacob to find the place. The hellish sound of his footsteps terrified them into silence. Coincidentally, the room where Amy and Will were hiding was right next to them. Jacob continued to move forward. As he walked, Jacob stopped, because he smelled the scent of Tamara's perfume. The brutal death of her friend made Amy hate Jacob with a passion. Just as they were staring at each other, Will smashed the window glass with a bench. Seeing this, Seth quickly crawled out from under the gurney and used it to block Jacob, then climbed through the window to escape. But just as they ran out of the room, Jacob burst through the wall and blocked the lagging Will. Instinctively, Will swung his fist in retaliation, but he was no match for Jacob. Jacob effortlessly pinned him against the wall. Then Jacob, full of menace, slowly lifted Will. At this moment, Amy wanted to save her brother but was stopped by Seth. Will also shouted for his sister to leave and not to sacrifice herself needlessly. In the end, Seth pulled Amy away. After they left, Will pulled a scalpel from his back pocket and stabbed it into Jacob's neck. In pain, Jacob yanked out the scalpel and, without thinking, plunged it into Will's chest. Don't worry, Will wasn't dead yet, because his death would be even more gruesome later. The scene shifted to Seth leading Amy to the exit, but as soon as they arrived, they were stunned, because the only exit was blocked by Kayla's corpse, placed there by Jacob. That's when Amy heard Will's screams. Realizing Will might still be alive, Amy smashed the fire glass, took out the hammer, and resolved to rescue her brother. Seth and Amy followed the sounds and the trail of blood on the walls, leading them to the basement. In a morgue, they found a barely alive Will. Will was weakly mumbling something. After tearing open Will's abdomen, Jacob crawled out from under the bed to taunt Seth and Amy. Seeing this, the grief-stricken Amy, driven by the power of family bonds, swung the hammer at Jacob repeatedly. However, Amy's strength was too feeble. Jacob effortlessly grabbed the hammer and was about to cut Amy down. At the critical moment, Seth charged in, blocking Jacob's lethal blow. Realizing Jacob's overwhelming strength, Seth and Amy fled in disarray. They managed to trap Jacob in the basement and fled back upstairs. While Jacob was trapped, Amy treated Seth's wounds. Then, Amy noticed a window that could be opened, but the gap was too small for Seth to pass through. Seeing this, Seth handed the car keys to Amy, telling her to leave without him. He urged Amy to go call the police and then come back to save him. Seeing Seth's resolve, Amy gave him a passionate kiss. Afterwards, Amy squeezed through the narrow gap to the outside. She cautiously moved forward, but hadn't gone far when she climbed back through the window. Amy had heard Jacob's footsteps. Terrified, Seth and Amy hid. With Jacob prowling around, Seth and Amy had to find another way out. Seth then came up with a plan, escaped through the side window of the hospital. But just as Amy was searching for the key to unlock the door, Seth realized something was wrong when it was too late. Amy had already been stabbed in the abdomen. Seeing the woman he loved die before his eyes was a devastating blow for Seth. Just as Seth was overwhelmed with grief, Jacob used the hole in the door to unlock it. Seeing the ruthless Jacob, Seth cursed and then fled once more. Before long, Seth ran back to the previous room. He intended to escape through the window, but as soon as he started to climb out, Jacob yanked him back in. Without giving Seth a chance to resist, Jacob threw him like a piece of trash. Jacob then moved the metal shelf, lifted Seth, tortured him for a while, and again tossed him aside like garbage. But Seth didn't give up because he found a way to win, as Jacob grabbed a machete to kill Seth.
You're not so tough. You're not.
Under the attack of an unknown machine, Jacob's eyes first started bleeding profusely, and then his blood vessels turned blue. Next, blue liquid flowed from Jacob's eyes. Within 2 minutes, Jacob convulsed and collapsed. When the machine stopped, Jacob was completely still. At the end of the film, Seth comes to Amy's body. He closed her eyes, then kissed her farewell. Seth left the mortuary and got into the car to call the police. But just as he opened the iron gate at the exit and was about to return, he was horrified to find the car door had been opened. Suddenly, Seth panicked and instinctively backed away. But in the next moment, he couldn't move any further.